We are talking today with Elaine Graham Estes. My name is Tom Peters. Today's date is Monday, March 5th, 2018. And Elaine's been our guest before on these oral history projects. But I wanted to talk to Elaine. Elaine, first, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks for asking me, Tom.
We're in my office in Duane G. Meyer Library on the Springfield campus of Missouri State University. I wanted to talk today about your, I guess you'd call it your formal schooling. That you grew up in Springfield, correct? You were born and raised in Springfield?
I was born and raised in Springfield, and all of my elementary and secondary schooling was here in Springfield at Lincoln High School. At Lincoln High School.
So you graduated in 1949?
Correct.
All right, and you were. I'm not trying to determine your birth date with how you stated, but you were 17, 18 when you.
I was 16 years old.
16. So were you did you jump some classes or?
No, I went through all 12 classes. My birthday's in November, so that makes a difference.
So you were 16 when you graduated from high school. Okay.
But my grandmother was 16 when she graduated from high school in Springfield too. So it happens.
Now this was a time when schools were segregated.
Yes, correct. They were. Yes, and there was one school for all grades. So
Lincoln, what we now call Lincoln High School, was really. Did they have kindergarten back then?
No, there was a private kindergarten or nursery school run by Edwina Lear, and I went to that before I went to first grade at Lincoln School. Okay. But Edwina Lear was a teacher who had her own school, and she coincidentally was a sister. Her maiden name was Smith. She was a sister to Herbert Smith, who had the Smith undertaking there. Okay. And then her other brother was in World War I and well known in World War I.
Okay. For his service to the.
For his World War, her other brother was in World War I service, and all of them were graduates of Lincoln University at Jefferson City.
Oh, okay. Yep. Do you have any recollections of your kindergarten days?
Yes, because they put big containers of milk on the table, and I never liked milk in this whole lifetime. I didn't like it then, and I visualized those big pitchers of milk.
That's all there was to drink?
That's all. I find milk repulsive to look at as well as drink.
Really?
So
even by the time you were a kindergartner, you did not like milk?
That's correct. I never liked milk from a child.
You've never liked milk your entire life?
Milk and eggs are two things that I do not like.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I can only imagine.
I liked Mrs. Lear very much. She was a very kind person, and we had nice tables to sit at and do the little projects that they gave us, and blocks to move, and pencil and paper and so forth.
Yeah. Was it in her home or was it?
It was in It was in a separate. She did not live there. But it was the building. It was a house, but it was totally devoted to this nursery school because they had some places, some rooms that you were to rest after a certain time of the day, and so this house was large enough to accommodate your meals in one place and your rest in another, and your work project, your schooling projects in another. But she did not live there.
Now, had your parents started the restaurant by the time you were in kindergarten?
Yes.
Okay.
My parents, I was 18 months old when my parents started the business.
Oh boy.
That was well.
And they both worked at it, right?
Yes, my mother had been a school teacher prior to her being married, And in that period of time, why married women all over the country could not teach if they got married, as you well know, and that was...
Yeah, my mom was a school teacher too, and as soon as you start having kids, career's over.
Yeah,
you know,
did not
back in the day.
Yeah.
Was that just accepted, or was it written into school board policy?
No,
or?
I think it was that it was law across the country, that it was written into legislation across the country, because in Des Moines I knew Mabel Dahlstrom-Borg, who was a funeral director, and Mabel had been a school teacher before she married. And after she married, she went to Mortuary College and got her degree in that, and came back to Des Moines. And she was in. She had been teaching in Illinois, and then when she married in Iowa, she couldn't teach either place. So that's pretty well worldwide. And I don't think that it changed until after about the time of World War II, because teachers were scarce, men were scarce then, they needed them for the military, and that's where, when that law was changed.
I mean, I was in primary grades in the early 60s in Iowa. All my teachers were women. Okay. And I think most of them were unmarried. Even in the early 60s in Iowa.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I remember the first time we got a man teacher. That was a big deal.
I see.
I think he taught social studies, 6th grade social studies.
Well, I was going to say, they didn't have very many men teaching in elementary school.
Yeah.
That's because they were at Lincoln School. The men taught boys the shop. Shop, yeah. And of course, in high school, a chemistry teacher was a man. Earl Brooks was the chemistry teacher. And then the band teacher was Foster, who incidentally became a very big name after he left Springfield, because he wrote books that the bands all over the country have won awards for, in those marching bands that are shown on.
Yeah. Didn't he start a marching band at one of the universities?
Yes, and I can't think of what the university was.
Yeah.
But his name was Foster.
Yeah, became quite famous for his band leadership and just how they...
well,
it was a marching band.
Marching bands, exactly, yeah. Public television has referred to him several times, and I've seen that in Iowa public television.
Yeah, so, I mean, he was a real pioneer.
And he, and his published books also were printed. Yeah. But he taught at Lincoln School.
Was that like his start? And he started a band at Lincoln, right?
Yes, he had a band. That's what he was, the band teacher. Foster was the band.
Was it also
teacher.
A marching band?
It was a marching band.
Yeah. Now, I apologize because I don't know as much as I should know. Back when you were in school, it was part of the Springfield School District, but they were basically operating they had 2 different high schools. Was it part of the Springfield School District?
Oh yes, it was part of it. Had always been part of the Springfield school system. Yeah. Mr. Studi was the superintendent of the schools, and then in the time that my mother taught at what was the old, they referred to it as the previous Lincoln School. Yeah. That also was part of, they were paid out of Springfield Public School. Okay. And they went to teachers' meetings and all of those things as were required by the Springfield Public School system. All right. And during my mother's teaching time, Mr. Fairbanks was superintendent part of the time, and then Studi came in. And Mother always after I went to Drake, that Mother was telling me about the tests that were administered in the school system came out of Des Moines.
Iowa Test of Basic Skills.
Test of Basic Skills. Yeah. And that started under Mr. Studi in the late 20s, late 20s, yeah. because mother quit teaching in 26 when and so that our basic skills was.
That's when that started?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. Went back that far. So after kindergarten, then you went to Lincoln.
Yes, my first grade teacher was Sarah Elliston, and the elementary school was basically on the first level, and the lower level. The first four grades were on the first level, and the 5th grade was on the level below that, and the 6th grade was upstairs, where and the cafeteria was on the lower level. And when I became older in school, I was cashier in the school in the cafeteria.
Really? All cash transactions?
All cash transactions.
No credit. Did they have did they have a school lunch program, or would?
I don't think so. I think you paid real money for your.
Paid real money,
and people could bring their lunch, but they could buy their lunch.
Did you ever go home for lunch when you were in grade school?
Oh, sometimes.
How far, you told me before, but you live north of the restaurant?
Oh, we live clear out by Kearney.
Yeah.
Almost to Dolling.
Yeah, okay.
Dolling Park.
So you couldn't have walked home over the lunch hour?
No. I was driven to school every day. By
pretty close to the restaurant.
It was close to the restaurant, yes. And I was driven to, Mother, Dad drove me to school every day. And occasionally I would ride the school bus, but I didn't care much about riding the school bus. I'd rather come in. My mother said I just always almost wanted them to drive me into the classroom. But the school bus, they had school buses that ran all over town, and you could ride the school bus if you chose.
Were the buses segregated too?
Yeah, that bus. I don't know how many school buses they had, because they would have had to have more than one to cover the city. Yeah. But that just ran. That was for getting children to Lincoln School. Yeah. And when I got older, I could sometimes walk to if my parents were not picking me up, I could walk to my dad's business, and they would call Mr. Fields and tell Mr. Fields that I was walking to the business, and Mr. Fields would say, "I'll look for little miss." Mr. Fields worked for my dad for many, many years. He had been through Springfield. He worked for the Circus, and he had been through here once and met our business, and then the Circus was stranded in Alaska, and he sent for my dad to come to send for him. And my dad sent for George Fields.
Wired some money.
And he came to work and worked till he died.
Wow. And he lived in one of the cabins back behind.
My dad built a place for him to live.
Does that happen to be the one that's still standing?
No, oh, okay. It was somewhat semi-attached to our other building.
So, how big of classes did you have? I guess I'm thinking back when I want to say 25 to 30 when I was in grade school.
I think so, something like that.
Yeah.
30.
Did you have assigned seats?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess they were alphabetically assigned. I especially remember in first grade assigned seats, and the first grade had its own cloakroom attached to it, because then you wore snowsuits, and you went and take your snowsuit off. Take your snowsuit off.
Would the teachers come out with brooms and brush you off when you came in? That's they used to do with us.
Sarah Ellison was the first grade teacher. Leona Smith was the second grade teacher. She was quite interested in art, and we did a lot of finger painting in second grade.
Did you enjoy art? What were your favorite subjects when you were in grade school?
Well, you took the grade school was kind of across
the whole
board.
curriculum was one teacher for the day.
Yeah,
but did you have, did you like math or hate math? Or?
No, I didn't have, because Mary Tolliver was the 4th grade teacher, and that's where we learned the tables, the multiplication tables, and the division. And I still multiply in my head and use the multiplication table.
You can see those tables.
Yeah. They did that was, and 3rd grade we did more. Reading was heavily emphasized. Roberta Thomas taught 3rd grade. Reading was heavily emphasized there. And reading aloud was something that she practiced to be sure that you could pronounce the words or that you were really learning to read. And
so would you have to stand up in front of the class and read the next paragraph? You
didn't. Yeah, sometimes we stood, but sometimes you just read from your table.
Yeah.
Or we sat around some of the time we sat around in a circle and read when she was having us read aloud.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than that, you had things to work on at your desk that tested your reading, but she was just very insistent on being on pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you enjoy reading when you were a child?
Yes, I've never liked fiction. I didn't
really?
like fairy tales.
So milk
and
fiction.
Milk and fiction. And I still don't like. I like biography. I like history.
Really? So it's always been more of a non-fiction person than a fiction
uh-huh.
person. Mm-hmm.
But the fairy tales that we read in those days didn't interest me a great deal. I guess I've always been a realist, but
yeah.
Seeing your maps around this room, that's the other thing that we learned to read. Learn to read maps.
How to read a map?
Because they had those large maps that were attached to the wall.
You pull them down. So in this era of segregation, could you go to the library?
Well, that Lincoln School had its own library.
Had its own library?
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't frequent the public library?
Well, you could frequent the public library, but they would bring things to the desk to you.
Really?
rather than going into the stacks. You asked for what you wanted. And
so it was a closed stacks, as we say.
Yeah.
We're both librarians, so we got to use closed stack. Dewey Decimal or?
No, Dewey Decimal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The Mildred McCullough was the first librarian that I remember at Lincoln School. And then there was another woman that came from St. Louis for a short time, whose name I don't recall. Mm-hmm. And then Daisy Adams was the librarian after that.
When you were in high school?
And when I was in
Yeah.
And that was the library was a very good sized room because also the long tables could be used as study tables, as you all know.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a pretty good collection for fiction? For nonfiction?
Yeah, it was.
Biography, history?
Well, and one of they bought a lot of African American related material. And we had assemblies, of course, and programs and that sort of thing. And always in February, during Negro History Week, at that time, a lot of the material was prepared and assigned to you to do in the assembly for a school-wide program.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think that collection was, I understood it when Lincoln School closed, was broken up and disseminated into the public library rather than the public school distribution. That's what I think.
And back then, the public library was the Carnegie Library.
That's correct, on Central.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The Lincoln School had an auditorium. The auditorium also doubled as a gym. And summertime, when the building was closed, why the custodians spent the summer refinishing the hardwood floors in the auditorium. Yeah.
When I was in junior high, we never called it middle school when I was a kid, but in junior high, I remember the basketball court had some dead spots.
Oh.
You know, and you'd have to learn where the dead spots were. So if you were on your home court, you knew where the dead spots were, and you kind of get the opposing person to dribble into that dead spot, then steal the ball.
I knew little about, I've never cared, sports is the other thing to add to that thing.
Sports,
I
okay.
had no interest
Milk,
in that.
fiction, and sports. I better start putting some stuff on the whiteboard here. So what did you enjoy doing in school? You were musically inclined?
Well, yes, and I played, sometimes I accompanied the chorus. Florence Sample was the course taught music there, and in addition to the performing things, there were classes related to music appreciation and so forth. And then the course traveled to Jefferson City for statewide competition. And
did you go?
I went on that several times. Yes, must have been either I don't know if it was sophomore and junior and senior year or just junior and senior year, but I remember I went more than once, and I think it was probably sophomore, junior, and senior year.
Yeah, it must have been quite a trip.
Well, to Jefferson City.
Yeah.
For a statewide competition, music competition.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Did you stay overnight?
I think Lincoln School won some of the competition. And of course, it was it really was the largest school in the state.
Yeah.
Except St. Louis and Kansas City.
Yeah.
Springfield would have been the largest color school for colored children.
Yep.
Yeah.
So on the athletic side, you didn't care for athletics,
No,
or so. And then there were very few women's sports.
Yeah, I think that basketball was probably. I played. I mean, we had recess in elementary school.
Yeah.
And I played marbles.
Marbles was your game?
Yes. And then there were part of the school grounds was another place where children would play baseball. I guess out of doors.
We played a lot of. We had those kind of big red balls that you'd kick around, kickball, and the other thing I remember was when I was growing up, both boys and girls, more girls than boys I think, but we both played jacks.
Yes, I played jacks.
Yeah,
I liked jacks.
And I got so I could kind of, I wasn't great at it, but
yeah,
I could do the pick up
jacks, and I also liked skipping rope.
Skipping rope, yeah, that was a good thing.
Well, and you played hopscotch.
Hopscotch. Yeah.
And,
we had like a jungle gym, one of those things that you could climb all over, and probably this is before they had, wood shavings and stuff. It was just gravel. If you fell down, you'd fall on your head. Skin your elbows, but
But there was a big play yard. There were really 3 sections because that school ran from one street to the other, so there were play yards on 3 sides of the school, and in front of the school were parking places.
Yeah. So during your school years, especially when you got older, would it be like one of your parents would take you to school, you'd go to school? Do you remember what the school hours were? Were they 8 to 3?
I think something like that.
Yeah.
8 to 3,
and then would you go over to the restaurant after that?
Well, yes, after. Or my parents would pick me up, but I'd go to, I went to work with Mother and Dad all the time. We did everything together.
Yeah.
But you also had homework in those days.
Yeah.
And, so they saw to it that I got my homework done.
Yeah.
No, but I went to the restaurant and worked as I was older, worked after school.
Yeah.
And stayed till.
Would you have parent-teacher conferences once a year or once a semester?
Yes, they had a PTA.
Yeah. Did you have to sit outside in the hallway while they talked to your parents about how you were doing?
Well, they did. Yeah, it seems to me that was in the evening.
Yes.
And you were,
You go in the evening with your mom and dad.
They went into the classroom.
Yeah.
And I guess they stashed me in the library probably because I don't remember being a part of the room.
I can remember sitting out in the hallway.
I think it was, but I remember one time one of my grades I was not satisfied with, and I had my parents ask about that when they were going to the parent-teacher conference to see.
Would you get, I forget what that was, like satisfactory, unsatisfactory?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then about four, there wasn't A, B, C, D, but it was like.
No, it was not.
Excellent maybe or something, or, you know. You could get really good, okay, not so good, really need some work.
I should say there were varying degrees, but I don't remember, and I don't think
I don't remember what they
we
were.
saved any of those report cards.
Yeah, but you get a report card on all your subjects.
Uh-huh.
Plus, I would get some.
Well, in high school you got them by subjects,
Oh,
but in elementary school you got them just by the overall. Yeah.
Did you get graded also on, like I did on? Everybody in my school got graded on, like, you know, personal hygiene, behavior,
no,
attentiveness.
Attentiveness and attentiveness, I guess, was the same thing as behavior. And then I told you, first grade was Sarah Elliston, second grade was Leona Smith, third grade was Roberta Thomas, fourth grade Mary Tolliver, fifth grade Ada Fulbright, sixth grade Geneva Cobb, and then went into junior and senior high school were taught by the same kind of overlapped teachers.
That's when you'd break up. Would you actually go from one room to the next?
To the other, yeah. And Ollie Decatur taught English, and Earl Brooks taught chemistry. Bud McAdams taught, I guess he must have been the sports teacher because I never had him for anything. Harrington was the history teacher. Mother always thought she made the best assignments and was a good person who knew her subject matter but didn't check on her assignments after as well as you did your homework, but
really?
you got your homework done.
Uh-huh.
And then as I said, Florence Sample taught music, and the band teacher. I guess those were the teachers in.
And just one principal, or did you have like an assistant principal?
No, Houston was the first principal, and then he left. He was there most of the time, and then Collins came after that, and Mary Carolyn Patterson was the office administrator to Collins. And,
did you ever have to go to the principal's office?
No, thank you. And as I told you, I worked in the cafeteria. I got and then I get to eat with Mary Carolyn Patterson. We ate with the lady who ran the cafeteria. And the three of us had our meal together after that, yeah. But
now, most of your teachers, like when I was in grade school and junior high and high school, they were part of the community. You'd see them out and about and at church, and, you know.
Well, and I guess that also is how they established relationships with knowing families and knowing what children were capable of, or what home problems were, and that sort of thing. And I think teachers interacted more with those families in terms of trying to help some of them, or making contact with the family if they thought that there was some way that the child could be helped in school by.
Yeah.
So as you say, they knew them through other community organizations or their church groups or whatever.
Yeah.
I guess I should tell, I had rather a different relationship with the teachers than most people did, because my mother had taught with all of the teachers.
So she knew them all.
She knew them all. I knew them all after school and during school. And then when my mother was teaching, she and the teacher started the literary comchat, and my mother was a charter member of that. And it was made up of 12 teachers from the school system, and that the literary comchat continued long after Lincoln School dissolved. But those teachers that were still a part of that are then scattered into other schools, invited other teachers in to that. So I went to, sometimes went to literary comchat meeting with my mother, or when they met at our house. It was a meal time, and they served and that sort of thing.
Oh, they'd come for a meal too? I'm not familiar with the literary comchat. Was it like
it was
book discussion group?
Mm-hmm. Book,
fiction?
I think they were, yes. Fiction,
mainly
poetry, fiction, poetry, and biography or whatever.
Yeah.
But people suggested, and they tried to read all the, because again they were working in segregated schools, and they tried to read all of the current authors' work of color then.
Yeah.
So that was quite a bit, and that was, and so they suggested things or bought things to support those authors.
Yeah.
They also would once or twice a year have a public program with the literary comchat and kind of inform people, the community, about different literary works that they thought were. And well, you mentioned the churches. The home economics teacher, who was Cordia Penn, belonged to the AME church, and they sponsored a style show every year, which they had in the Lincoln School auditorium.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a fundraiser for that church. But I got to model in that quite a few times. And
did you enjoy modeling as a young woman?
I did.
Yeah.
Carried on to, since you're an Iowan, you know about Younkers.
Oh, yeah.
I modeled on the Younkers stage.
Younkers was a big department store in Iowa. Yeah. Still in business, right?
It's still in business.
Yeah.
It's a part of one of those national chains now.
Like Dayton Hudson or something.
Bontemps or something.
Yeah.
But Younkers, the main downtown store of Younkers, had the tea room, which had a stage on it, and there were models there, and I modeled there during my break time.
When you were back to your high school years, what would you do on a Friday night, Saturday night? Would you go to a football game? Would you go out with friends to the soda shop? Or
well, I didn't go to football games. There were football games, but that wasn't my style. But as I mentioned to you,
you could not stand sports. You had no interest in sports.
No interest in sports, and I always say I know about a half a teaspoon about sports. And of course, my late husband was a well-known a very big sports person at the University of Iowa.
Yes,
So, but I didn't learn anything all those years we were married. Well, as I told, the Lincoln School auditorium was used by other for other venues, like I mentioned that AME Church having their style show there, and there were some other churches that put on plays or whatever. Lincoln School also put on plays, and poetry readings and drama, or I guess we call them drama readings.
Recitations. Do you ever call them recitations?
But sometimes those happened in the evening, as well as during a school day too, and that's when. And the reason, of course, for the evening was so parents could come. For the daytime, things were just for the in school.
The students. You had assemblies and things.
The assemblies.
Did you ever have like we had a puppeteer that would come in once a year, and kind of assemblies were that more for entertainment than.
Yeah. Sometimes the assemblies were.
Magician or something.
Some musicians, I remember. I don't remember puppeteers, but I do remember music. Yeah. And then the other entertainment, of course, that was community entertainment rather than school entertainment, were the medicine shows that came to town.
Yeah, tell us about those.
Those happened on out of doors usually. And that was quite a fun thing to go to. I loved going to those.
So I've never been to a medicine show, but the basic premise was you'd have a variety of entertainment.
Yeah.
And the whole thing would lead up to the pitch, so to speak, that you needed to have this elixir that was cure whatever ailed you, and then they would sell that.
They'd sell that. Yeah, the bottles of the
elixir.
But the entertainers were really pretty good.
Do you remember any of the entertainers? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember any.
Weaver Brothers, or
I don't remember any of the names, but I just remember going to. And I'm trying to think if we took your own chair. Or if they had, I think you took your own stool or camp stool or whatever and sat out on, because I remember they were all out on the out of doors. And actually, my folks owned a large lot on Kearney Street, and it happened that lot was used a number of times.
Where on Kearney Street?
Between Campbell and Boonville, and now a car lot.
They'd have medicine shows.
I think they had medicine shows there, and they'd put up, they'd erect a kind of a stage-like thing, temporary stage-like thing, and then people sat on the grounds.
And these were traveling shows. They'd be moving around from town to town. And,
they always came from out of town. And then after that, they would parade through the audience with their bottles of things to sell. To be
Cash
sure
only.
that everybody could see it.
Would have any testimonials? Someone would stand up and say, "Oh, I took this." And
it was almost as good as a circus, but it didn't have the animals in it.
But you enjoyed those.
I enjoyed those. Well, of course, we had real circuses in, but that was at the Shrine Mosque.
Did you ever go to the circus at the Shrine Mosque?
But the fun thing was to see the circus unload their animals, and they unloaded out on Glenstone and came down Mill Street to, to National and St. Louis, and you'd see those animals parade at night. That was interesting. That's getting away from Lincoln School, but anyway.
But so generally, you enjoyed your high school years.
And of course, by the time I was old enough to drive, I drove myself to school.
So when did you learn to drive? Were you 16?
I think I was 15. Because I was driving in my junior year. I think you could drive. You had a driver's.
I know when I was 16 when I was growing up. Unless you were a farm kid, then you could drive when you were 14.
Because you had to come to town and go to. As I told, the school there was parking on in front of the school and on Central Street, and then there was a parking lot across the street on Sherman. The other thing you mentioned about, as I said, you could take your lunch or you could go to, and some people who lived close enough would go home to lunch, but you could bring your lunch and that.
Just lunch, no breakfast.
No, there were no free meals in those. No, they were no breakfast. There were no breakfast meals. It was just lunch, and they
government peanut butter or any of those things that I remember.
No, that's
a lot of cheese too. A lot of government surplus cheese that they would serve at school lunches.
Ethel Jackson cooked pretty good real food.
Yeah.
So
it was good food.
It was good. It was her. It was solid. I mean, she'd have spaghetti, or she'd have meatballs or whatever, and then they had salads, and there was always desserts. Of course, they made sheet cakes and like gingerbread or whatever.
Did you have any regular, like Taco Tuesday or anything like that, or
no?
You'd always have spaghetti on Friday or something.
No, they had chili.
Yeah.
Casseroles, like tuna casseroles. That was
but do you remember it as being pretty good food?
They sold bags of potato chips too, because I remember where my cashier's desk was. That there was they sold bags. I could sell bags of potato chips. But as the cashier, I earned my lunch. That was my free lunch. My pay for being cashier was my lunch.
So you worked for your lunch.
I worked for my lunch.
Any subjects that so home economics was one.
Yes, well, the home economics, the other interesting thing that we did that I remember, 3 or 4 times a year, we would have a special luncheon, and outside people would be invited to that luncheon.
And you'd prepare the meal?
And we prepared the meal and served it and set the table and so forth. There were off of the home economics room where it was sort of a room where there was one side that there were chairs and tables and things for sitting down. Then there was the cooking area. Then there was another room off of the side that was the dining room when we had the events.
Yeah.
And so our parents or friends would get invited, and the ladies came dressed with hats and gloves to the lunch, and it's in the days when people wore real clothes, and they served, so.
So I'm assuming it was young women only were in home economics, and the boys young men were shop class.
Shop class, yeah.
And when I was in junior high, it was wood and metal. It's like one semester you did wood, the next semester you did metal, and then I was a little bit later. Plastics came in. We made some plastics.
I think it was all wood, because they had saws and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And they made real. I mean, they didn't make novelty stuff, but that dates back even to my mother's brother's time. My grandmother's dining room table was made by her son.
In shop class.
Shop class, and it was a dining room table that had a silver drawer in the table.
Really?
A pull-out silver drawer. And a few years ago, I loaned to the Springfield Museum, the Springfield History Museum, a bookcase that was made by the shop.
Yeah.
People. So
I think I made some bookends, but that was about as ambitious as I got.
Full-size bookcase.
Wow. In shop class.
This is getting away from Lincoln School in Springfield, but my aunt my mother's sister was a home economics teacher in Kansas City, and she introduced home economics for boys during that time,
Oh, yeah.
and that was the that was the beginning of it in the Kansas City school system.
Yeah.
And that was that was late days. I remember.
Yeah. Any foreign languages?
Yes, French.
French.
And
Did you enjoy French?
I did.
Yeah.
And it came in handy when I went to library school. I didn't have to repeat that. Or take the they had, they were not teaching Latin by my time. They taught Latin in my mother's time.
Yeah.
And then I guess in my mother's time they taught Latin, German, and French. Because Mother would tell me that during the World War I, they quit teaching German in the Springfield school systems.
Really?
And my grandmother always thought that was a huge mistake, that more than ever people should have been able to have German. Yeah. But,
so you were in school during the war years. If you graduated in 49,
yeah.
So you would have been roughly in middle school. What do you remember about the war years? Rationing?
Rationing, you had ration books, and of course that affected businesses as well as individuals.
It really hurt business, the war years?
Restaurant
business?
You had ration books, and that was the beginning of when my dad started selling barbecued chicken, because chickens were not rationed, and you could buy and they bought and fish he started selling then, because those were two things that were available while other meat was short supply.
Yeah.
There's the troop trains came in quite close to Lincoln School, and between Lincoln School and where our business was on Chestnut, and Lincoln School was on and the troop trains came through and stopped there, and a lot of those troop trains came to our business.
Yeah.
But that was and of course Springfield is very close to Fort Leonard Wood, so that.
So you had a lot of soldiers over the weekend pass would come to Springfield.
Yeah. And there were two of the teachers then married somebody that they met out of the military. Sarah Elliston, the first grade teacher, and then she moved to that. She married. That was must have been near the end of the war. Anyway, she moved to Detroit, but it was a soldier that she met through Fort Leonard Wood. Of course, Springfield had a USO.
Yeah.
And people would meet at the USO.
So, during your school days, did you have any interaction, when you were in high school, did you have any interaction with Springfield High students? Well, that weren't that far away.
You mean Central High?
Central High, yeah.
Other than, of course, the civic music played at Central High, and my parents had season tickets to, but that's not really, not connected to the school, but it met in the school. Like I said, those auditoriums were used, and so Central High.
Were real, community resources.
Yeah. But as far as students, we never interacted with Central High, and they never interacted. I don't ever remember them even visiting for any program or anything.
Really? What about with the normal school? Would you ever get any?
You mean the normal school being Missouri University?
Yeah,
so
Missouri State, but the fourth normal school, and
no.
Would you get what do they call them when you go in?
Practice teacher? Practice teachers?
Yeah.
No. And there were substitute teachers when occasionally people were ill, but they were and come to think about it, I'm trying to think. I think in elementary school, if a teacher was ill, they just sent you into another grade room with that, because I don't ever remember a substitute teacher.
You just double up for that day?
They just double up for that day. And I don't remember them being ill too long. The other reason that I remember about married women being because when World War II started, the school principal wanted my mother to come back to be a substitute teacher, and so they were looking for, I guess they had something, real things as substitute teachers in, but she didn't do that.
Yeah, but during the war, I mean, all labor was scarce.
Scarce, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think in the library, if the librarian was ill, it was just on the honor system that you could go into the library and help yourself. I think, and I believe once or twice maybe that the principal's office assistant came into the library and just basically sat there because there wasn't anything she was trained for.
Now, you were, I graduated in '49, just at the dawn of the nuclear era. Did you ever have, like, duck and cover exercises where you would pretend that there'd been some
drills?
Drills, yeah.
No, we just had fire drills.
Oh, you remember fire drills? Yeah.
I remember fire drills, yeah. And you had been trained where you were, what doors to use, and you were to line up according to your grade. You just didn't line up with first come, first serve. You lined up according to
grade. Line up, go exit the building.
Come back in groups. Come to think about, also on the playground, you came back in by grades, and everybody didn't, and there were teachers there monitoring the doors and the hallways as you came in.
Now, I hadn't thought about this for years, but did they use the handbells?
For the fire drills?
Or just to call you for recess is over, or time to come in at the start of the school day?
Well, off of the playground, they used the bells.
Yeah.
But I don't remember that they used them at the morning. But there was something that I don't remember they used them at the morning.
Yeah.
But also, again, I remember the morning thing, we said the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, first thing.
First thing.
Yeah,
And you,
at Christmas time, would you do anything special in school?
Well, they had Christmas plays, and that was part of the, they prepare for that.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing that we did to learn, we talked about math and reading and that sort of thing. At Valentine's Day, we would play post office. And that was about second grade that I remember that. And you learned how to sort the mail. You were to bring Valentine's. Sometimes
cards.
Also they made Valentine's in school.
Yeah. But
you'd sort the mail and then you'd deliver the mail. So that did two things. You learned how to alphabetize. You learned other people's names as well.
Now, you were an only child, correct?
Yes.
So you didn't have any, but I'm guessing that being in school with siblings was an experience. I can tell you that.
Oh. How many do you have?
I have 3 brothers.
I see.
But I especially remember my little brother. I once had, the only time I had to go to the principal's office was I would allegedly beaten up on my little brother. I deny all wrongdoing, but so you didn't have any other siblings in school. You were,
And I've never been a big groupie either, and there were 2 or 3 really close friends in there.
Yeah.
One of them is one of the universities. Recently, her mother was my good friend, and you know, Charlotte Harden,
Uh-huh.
who's recently retired from here.
Uh-huh.
Her mother was my really very best friend, and they came from out of town. Mr. Ellis was moved here by the Greyhound Bus Company,
Mm-hmm.
and Margaret Ellis, the daughter that was my age, came in about, so it was either second or third grade,
Mm-hmm.
and so I got and enjoyed her company.
Yeah.
And
So you went on to Drake University. You went on to become a well-known librarian. You were head of the Des Moines Public Library for almost 2 decades.
mhm.
Yeah. As you look back on your K through 12 education, what would you say? Was it really good? Was it?
Well, I guess it got me through Drake. And
Yeah.
Drake is not
It's no slouch university.
Drake is not an easy school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So when you got through Drake, did you feel like I can do this? Like I'm prepared
well,
for
I
college
felt,
level work?
you know, speed reading was not something that was taught or known about so when I was in elementary or high school here. And then I took a speed reading course after I went to Drake from somebody on the outside in the community, just because again, it seems like the reading that I was taught, you read word for word and everything you didn't. And so that slowed my process down a lot at Drake, more than I needed to. So I took the speed reading class to
That helped.
help with that, yeah.
Um,
But I felt that you know, I felt I'd had the basics, and I didn't have the French got me through graduate school. I did, and so that was the chemistry and the biology. I well, I did take. There was a economic geography class at Drake, and again, I felt that my general history course here had allowed, and as I told you, we learned to read maps and that sort of thing, so the geography of that I kind of understood pretty well.
Mm-hmm. What did you major in at Drake? I mean, at Drake.
At Drake,
Yeah.
Business Administration.
Business administration.
Retailing.
Okay. Oh, that's
Because
right.
of my dad's business, yeah.
Um,
That was, and the other part of that was because you had Drake offered a practicum, and that's how I got connected with Younkers, because the students worked out there. So
Yeah.
it was
Worked out well.
Mhm. But Lincoln School, I guess, if you applied yourself, and that's true with any school or any student, if you applied yourself, you get on to.
You get a good education.
Yeah.
So really, typing, did you learn to type when you were at Lincoln School?
Mm-hmm.
Take typing class?
I did.
Manual?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they hide the keys so you could?
ASDFJKL semicolon QRST.
Did eventually they hide the keys so you had to really type without looking down? And
Well, you had, no, they didn't cover them, but your typing book was one, and they gave you enough exercises that, and also your speed was tested.
yeah.
That was important.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anything else about going to school back then? Did you have a swimming pool?
No.
Sometimes back in those days, you had to be able to swim across the pool to graduate.
The other thing that was separate here in Springfield was Silver Springs Park.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, Red Cross taught swimming at Silver Springs Park.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents would send me every year, but I'd stay about once or twice, and I decided the water was dirty, and I didn't return, so I never really didn't. Yeah. But that was, And also that's where people played tennis too, because I don't think they ever played tennis on the Lincoln School grounds. They played that at Silver Springs Park.
Yeah. Now school would go from
September to
early September till early June.
And I don't ever remember there being a snow day or a bad weather day.
Yeah.
You went to school every day. And
did you ever have like tornado warnings?
No.
When you were in school?
And I don't remember there ever being any makeup days. You were out by Memorial Day. Kind of seems like that was the end of school, was Memorial Day.
Yeah.
And that was a fixed time.
And how would you spend your summers?
Oh,
just playing?
Again, my parents' business, or we went to St. Louis always every summer to the Muni Opera. And then the Muni Opera was at Forest Park, and we'd see that wonderful, wonderful animal shows in the daytime, and then we'd go to the opera in the evening. And that was an excellent experience. My dad's home was 90 miles from St. Louis, so we went on to visit my Aunt Carrie, his sister. He had one sister, and then we'd go on to visit her.
Which direction? Illinois?
No, Montgomery City, Missouri.
Montgomery City,
Missouri. No, we're all Missourians.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
But, and then, of course, as I said, my mother's sister lived in Kansas City. So we went to Kansas City a lot to see Aunt Grace, but Aunt Grace was not married for a long time, and she always came home in the summertime, and I looked forward to having a wonderful summer with her because I just loved her dearly.
Yeah.
And she had one of those roadsters that had the open back.
Oh, yeah,
and that was
what do they call it? Rumble seats?
Rumble seat.
Rumble
yes,
seat.
Rumble seats, and I loved going riding in the rumble seat.
So I don't mean to pry, but you can just generalize if you want to. But what was, when you were in high school, what was dating like when you were in high school?
People dated. It wasn't necessarily my thing.
Wasn't your thing, but you know.
But
people would go on dates.
Well, and they had dances in the evening, but
Yeah.
Something else I don't.
Would you have school
something
dance?
else that I don't like. Yeah, they had school dances a lot.
But you never liked to dance.
Mm-mm. Yeah. My mother and Dad thought I should learn how to dance, but they had me take. I had private tap dance lessons.
Really?
I didn't,
You didn't like those either?
I didn't like those either. No, exercise is not big on my list.
There was a girl in my neighborhood. She'd go around heel toe, heel toe, heel toe. My tap dance teacher was good, but no, I don't know how. But there were a lot, and I think I believe sometimes there was live music, maybe played by some of the students. Really?
At those schools.
A live band.
As live band. Yeah.
Right.
That was pretty special.
Back when you were in grade school, did they ever have like almost like a picnic field day kind of thing where you all go outside, whether it's May Day or?
Well, as I said, we went outside to the playground a lot.
Do the three-legged race and those kind of things.
Well, another thing I read, this was not in grade school, but in home economics, we made May Day baskets.
Yeah.
Because again, you were taught about all of the holidays, and that's why, again, the Valentine card and.
Yeah, presidents.
President.
There was Lincoln and Washington.
There was no such thing as President's Day then, no. And then you see Negro History Week was, which started in 1926 by Carter G. Woodson, and the dates of it were scheduled between Lincoln's birthday and Frederick Douglass's birthday, so that's how that February date came in.
Yeah.
And we'd have big programs in place during that time. But all of them, I'm trying to think what happened. Don't remember much about anything being related to New Year's, but Christmas, as I said, the Christmas
program.
And Thanksgiving you were taught about that. And it seems to me I remember some activity that, again, where in the auditorium where that you dressed up like pilgrims or whatever too.
All right.
Well, what else do you think of that way?
Well, I'm running out of questions, so I want to thank you for sharing some of your schoolhood memories with us. You have a great memory, by the way. I don't think I could name all my grade school teachers.
Well, as I said, they were my teachers during the day that I was taught to respect them, and they were my parents' friends in the evenings.
The one question that we were talking yesterday was, sometimes you'd play pitch with your school teachers.
Bridge.
At night.
At the,
Yeah.
My mother and dad played bridge with, particularly the principal and his wife. The Houstons played a lot of bridge, and mother and dad played bridge with the Houstons, and they played with Roberta Thomas too. And most of my mother and dad's friends were all the teachers. Most of them didn't have any children. So I would get invited to be the substitute bridge player.
What'd you think of that?
I learned to play good bridge, and that carried me through to. I played a lot of bridge in library school. I didn't play much at Drake. I didn't have time at Drake, but in library school I played bridge. But the Houstons, who were the principal, also had 2 daughters and 1 son, and one of them was older than I and one's younger, and then their son my mother had taught in school. But Swansea taught, that's who my French teacher was Swansea Houston, I knew them pretty well. And then my dad, Earl Brooks, who was the chemistry teacher, would stop by after school at my dad's business and play rummy with him. And then Mac Adams would stop by and play rummy with Mr. Fields, our employees.
So if you were playing bridge with your teachers and principal, if you were winning, would that fill you with glee or consternation that you were beating your teachers?
As I say, I respected them as teachers during the day, and they were friends. And I somehow either mother and dad taught me, or that I learned how to separate the two. You win or you lose according
on your own merit.
According to what the game demands.
Yeah.
But the Houstons played really good bridge. That was when people played contract. They played contract bridge, not the bridge like people go to the bridge houses and play. And then Roberta Thomas, who was the 3rd grade school teacher, had been my mother's college classroom mate, and they were lifetime friends forever. And so sometimes, again, when Mother would pick me up at school in the evening, we'd go by, we'd stop at Roberta's on the way home for her to have a visit with her. And that was.
Did Lincoln High School, most schools have almost like arch rivals, you know. When I was growing up in Fort Dodge, there was a North Junior High and a South Junior High, and you know.
Well, the only competition was that music competition that I told you about that took place at Jefferson City. And I don't, well, now that brings up a good question. I don't know who they would play, or if they just had who they play basketball again, because they had this basketball thing in the auditorium. But whether they just had 2 teams of their own, or if I don't know where they get their competition.
Okay.
And I don't know anyone to ask about that either. But I know those were, and I know they had, I think at the earlier Lincoln School, they had girls basketball. I know because when Mother was a student there.
6 women like in Iowa, the half-court game, or do they play the full court?
I don't.
You don't remember?
Don't know enough about. I just remember. I do remember she played basketball, and I remember talking about midi. They wore midi blouses. Were part of their clothing for playing
basketball.
Basketball, yeah.
Well, thanks very much for sharing your memories about your grade school, your formal education, especially before you went to Drake.
All in Springfield, Missouri.
All right.
Thank you for
Thanks.
having me.
Thank you very much.